Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our event this evening, entitled Pair Programming and WhatsApp Chatbots. So here's what's in store for you this evening. We have two amazing talks, plus a non-coding superpower talk. We'll start with that and then proceed with the first talk about pair programming, followed by a bit of Q&A, then a short break, and then we will have a talk about improving your vocabulary with a chatbot, plus another Q&A, and we should be wrapping up at around 10 minutes to 9 o'clock. So welcome to another PyLadies Berlin event. If you're new to the group, let me introduce to you PyLadies. We are a global organization. We are an international mentorship group. The focus on helping more women to be more active in the Python open source community. So yeah, our mission is to promote and educate and advance a diverse Python community through events like this, conferences and social gatherings. So we aim to provide a friendly support network for women in the larger Python community, not just in Berlin, but around the world. So we are global, that's for sure. We are present in 64 countries, and we have 125 active groups around the world. If you're interested to explore these PyLadies stats, I think Rashima is from the PyLadies New York City group. She created this awesome dashboard that you can access via this URL. I think it's really cool to see how many PyLadies there are around the world. Yeah. So because we aim to be an inclusive and diverse community, we have a code of conduct. We believe that knowledge is for all, and at the same time, we would like our events to primarily empower women in the tech community here in Berlin. So by attending our events, including this online event, we ask you to abide by our code of conduct. And yeah, we expect everyone to be respectful. This is a harassment-free zone, and we won't tolerate any harassment or bullying of any community member. So we have a code of conduct on the main PyLadies website. You may access it via this URL as well. Just be nice to each other. It's easy and it's free. And we're here to have a good time. And by playing nice and living nice, we'll all achieve that. So 4 social rules to help you out. We will have a Q&A this evening, and we ask people to ask nice questions and be kind to the speakers, and questions that start with no, well, actually, don't really help. No feigned surprise, no, oh, I can't believe you didn't know about this tool, or I can't believe that you are doing this thing. Also not a helpful comment. No backseat driving, which means basically don't tell people how to do things and assume that you know better than them. And no subtle isms as well. So these social rules come from a group called the Recurse. So you can check out their social rules on their website via this link as well. So yeah, just be nice to each other this evening. So more about the Berlin PyLadies chapter. This is my favorite slide because it talks about mostly things that we did in a pre-COVID world. It's been half a year now since we did any of these things, but here we are still talking about it. So in a pre-COVID world, we had regular monthly meetups in person. Remember when that was a thing? We would have either talks like the event that we're having this evening, or workshops, which last about 3 hours to half a day on weekends sometimes. So twice per year, we had full-day workshops. The last one we had was an Internet of Things workshop, which was really cool. We also had set up events to get people started with Python and coding. And of course, this is a networking group. People We help people connect to other people who have interesting jobs or interesting projects. And we, also like to hang out. We sometimes do lunches as well. And just basically, organize any events that are interesting and cool and relevant to the PyLadies community. So with that, if you'd like to get involved, if you'd like to give a talk or a workshop, or if you'd like to organize a meetup, or be a mentor or coach for one of our workshops, we would love you to join the organizing team. We are a pretty friendly bunch, I would say. A lot of us are really keen on having more people on board with different skills and different perspectives. So if you're interested in organizing an event with us, you can see the contact details here below. You can talk to us on Twitter, send us an email at berlin@pyladies.com. And speaking of staying in touch, we have a Slack channel or a Slack workspace. We are part of the PyLadies global workspace. That means by joining the Slack workspace, you get access to basically all the PyLadies around the world. So if you were part of the Berlin Slack, the PyLadies Berlin.slack.com, I think, it would be great if you could sign up to the global one as well. So to do that, just visit this URL, slackin.pyladies.com. Enter your email address and you should get an invitation in your email and join our channel, city-Berlin. So just a quick note, we are taking a break in August and we will be back with events in September. So this will be our last event for the next 6 to 8 weeks or so. So just so that you don't miss us too much, here are some great events that you can join. There is a PyBerlin event tomorrow, which is really cool. And the Python users group also has an event in mid-August. And because many of us are still in lockdown and not doing in-person events, you can attend events of other PyLadies chapters. So PyLadies Dublin has an event in mid-August as well, and they're looking for speakers. And the PyLadies Global Slack channel also has a virtual book club focusing on bias in tech. So if you join our Slack channel, our Slack workspace, you can join the channel Book Club Bias in Tech to find out more. So today we have 3 awesome speakers. First, we have Ilona, who will be talking about writing manuals as part of our non-coding superpower speaker series. And then we have Syamala, who will be talking about pair programming, and Ritu, who will be talking about her WhatsApp chatbot project. Yay. Before I go, thank you to Ecosia for being our Zoom sponsor this evening. I think a lot of you are aware and know about Ecosia. It is the search engine that plants trees. Wonderful. Thank you again for giving us access to your premium Zoom account. Oh yeah, before I really go, at the end of this event, we will be sending around a feedback form. It would be great if you could give us feedback on how you liked the event or didn't like the event. It's really important for us to hear what you have to say about our event so that we can keep giving you the content that you appreciate and like. And there is also a global PyLadies membership registration. So if you want to be an official PyLadies member, go sign up for that via the link below on the screen, not below. All right, let's get started with our non-coding superpower talk, writing manuals for everybody.
Okay, so hello, my name is Ilona. You can find me on Twitter, you can find me on Slack as well. and I'm going to talk about writing manuals for all today. Well, I'm not really a programmer, but I sort of call out on Twitter that people are PyLadies are looking for non-coding superpowers to talk about in this event here. So I thought, okay, I did something, and I think it can be useful for many more people. So because if we program something, if we do something, if we make something, we want for as many people to use it as possible. And because every program is in a way just as good as its manual, because people might not know how to use it and they need the manual to look it up. So yeah, you want to avoid as many obstacles as possible in a way. So either if my observation was either if you're using free open source software or conventional software like proprietary software that you have to pay for, as I said, usually you want to have as many users as possible. And especially during Corona now, there was a extra push in having digital tools, having kindergartens, having schools, having more different jobs, having to work online and stay connected. And when I scroll through Twitter, of course, there's a certain bias because I follow certain people. I was observing many people pushing for free open source software and hardware and for everyone to use it right now. And well, as I said, it's not that easy for everyone. And on good days, I might start a friendly conversation or discussion on that is not always people being ignorant and not being aware of privacy issues and so on. If they don't use the tools, it's maybe also because they simply don't know how. And for IT, digital natives is just so much easier. Yeah. So what did I do? I wanted to make I wanted to stay in touch with my grandfather who lives about an hour away, a bit more. And he's in his 80s, so he's certainly in the risk group. So having him on the phone is one way to stay in touch, but having him like in a video call is another layer, so he doesn't feel that lonely. And also for me, it's nice to see him every now and then. So he has a smartphone, he's very eager using it more than his landline because it's easier for him to use it with his hearing aids. And also he bought himself a computer a while back and he's researching spare parts if a car has to be fixed. But also if, for example, he pushes a button or touches the screen somewhere and ends up in a menu that he doesn't know, he gets stressed out. And I can totally understand why. So knowing all this, I made a manual for him to use Jitsi. And I asked beforehand on Twitter if someone had a manual already that maybe I could use. And all I could find was really like short, on point manuals. And I thought that's not really that helpful for the certain case that I want to use it in. And my approach to making a manual was, okay, I have to look at the tablet that I'm using as though I never used it before. So what could be questions I have? So this is the manual I made. It's designed in a way that you print it out, you have it next to you, and you use it while you go step by step through the software. And this has two big advantages, I think. So the one advantage is if you have someone else use the manual and you are on the phone, you can say, okay, let's take a look. Does your screen look like on page 4 or like on page 5? And if not, you can navigate the person through the manual. Also in this case, it's very helpful to have it also opened on your computer or device. And the second thing is paper is really patient. So you can have it next to you, you can take as much time as you need. It won't switch off, it won't change anything. So you can really look and compare and take your time. So let's have a close look at the manual. I made a lot of photos. So it's many, many photos and as little text as possible in the manual. So starting, as I said, with the approach that I wanted to make the manual as though I never used the tablet before. You have a picture, of course, of the tablet because you have to know where's the camera, what buttons are there, and what functions do they have. The manual is a step-by-step guide. So it's also like switching on the tablet, switching it off. And also, for example, having in the last line, you can see this additional info that you don't have to switch off the tablet because there's also this feature of just switching off the screen. Another thing is it's called Jitsi, but certainly if you read it like the German version, it would be like Jitsi. So it's helpful to also include the name in the manual because if I talk with my grandfather and say, let's meet on Jitsi, he probably maybe doesn't know what I'm talking about. And also describing or in a way, describing the way that someone would use the tool or how it's working. So it's a video call tool and it works like rooms that you enter or leave rather than ringing someone. So as you can see here, for example, here I have this tap the blue symbol on the left. I discovered that very often it's easier to work with descriptions, like seeing it, the symbol on the left in the corner, rather than with colors or trying to somehow describe what the symbol might look like. Because blue doesn't look blue to everyone. My grandfather, he said it looked green. And also the Jitsi symbol could be something like a scribble, a ghost, or anything. Yeah, and then it's really just a step-by-step guide. Here in this page, you can see it's sometimes helpful to have like this different screens there, so you can. It's easy to see. So does your screen look like the corner, the top picture, or the bottom picture? Yeah, it's important also to include troubles because there is no way to avoid them. And the thing is, you learn so much if you solve a problem. And so, and most of the problems aren't really problems at all because they're just like little gadgets or things that are intended to be like super cool and helpful. For example, having the small videos in the corner. But for someone who is not native to the tool, he might think, okay, he closed it, yeah. So also having this included, how you can navigate back to where you want to be. So here we go. I made a mistake too, for example, at the first time I made the manual and I was talking with my grandfather on the phone and he was like, okay, so it looks like this, but there is no yellow circle. And I really didn't consider that. Of course, he could think that the yellow circle is also part of the screen. So if you use symbols like circles or arrows or anything, include them on the first page, say, okay, these are symbols that you will never see on the screen, especially if you work with screenshots. So what is the outcome? Instructions are very often too small to read, and also they can be too complicated, too nerdy, too techy, too short, too important, too minimalistic, too specific, little for the target group. And they don't have to be that way because it's actually not that hard to write a good manual, I think, or I'm pretty sure of. So what are the outcomes? As I said, I try my best to be as patient and as attentive as possible in designing the manual. And still there were things that I had to change after the first call with my grandfather. So design with people. And of course, especially now, you can't really work with people because you have to be in different places maybe, but get them on your team and get their feedback. and get their honest feedback and be open to as much feedback as possible, because they don't want to critique you, but they want to give you like really constructive feedback. So to wrap it up, a few things that are kind of obvious, but we often forget them. Symbols, they mean different things to different people. Someone might not know what the symbol for settings mean because he only knows these tools from his workshop, but he never saw them in digital tools. So it's helpful to use rather locations and screenshots than trying to describe. Because as Luke says it here, it is a mess of weird symbols and shapes that you can hardly figure out what they mean. And I have like a little disclaimer, I had the option of setting up the tablet for my grandfather, so I was able to change as many settings as possible. So take advantage of the settings that you can change. So for example, going to sleep mode of the screen, you can deactivate it, and it makes things easier. So you probably waited for a picture of my grandfather. So here's a picture of my grandfather, and being all cool and laid back in his kitchen, me and my mom trying to figure out how to be on the camera, but he is like super chilled. Sharing is caring. I made this manual. By now it's only in German, but it has like a ton of pictures. And you are more than welcome to adapt it, to share it, to use it as inspiration for maybe another manual. Yeah, it's an ODT, it's PDF, so you can certainly just like, yeah, as I said, you can find me on Twitter. If you have questions, I think there's an option of you can write me on Slack, but maybe also in the Twitch comments. Yeah, have a nice rest of the evening.
Thank you so much, Ilona. That's a really, really helpful resource that you've created. Maybe one of the PyLadies in our community can translate it from German to English.
Hi, I'm Shamala. I'm currently working as a site reliability engineer at Volkswagen Digital Lab, working in tech for almost a decade now. Love being part of the communities and speaking at meetups in general. And thank you, PyLadies Berlin, for giving me the space to talk about a topic that I'm really passionate about. Yeah, so what I'm going to talk about today is pairing, also pair programming. It is a skill that you can learn. So when I started to work in the digital lab 4 years back, I was introduced to pair programming. For about 6 years, my daily routine is to just go to work, take the headphones, put on the playlist of the day, and start to work. So you can imagine my shock when I heard pair programming. Someone is watching while I code. This thought really, really terrified me. But I have grown to like it in the past 5 years. So now I can't find a better way to collaborate as a software engineer. So I have successfully, I think, learned how to pair program. And in this talk, I will provide you with a comprehensive guide that will help you to learn this as any other skill that you can learn. So philosophically, there are 4 stages of learning. So the first stage is unconscious incompetence. So it's like, I don't know what I don't know. The second stage is conscious incompetence. I don't know how to do this yet, which means you are well aware of what you don't know. And the third stage is that you learn, and it's conscious competence. I know how to do this stage. And the fourth stage is unconscious competence, that I can do this effortlessly, right? So everyone who set out to learn something new goes through 4 different stages, and all these stages we can assert what we know and what we don't know. So I'm trying to address each stage with respect to pair programming, how realization of what we know and don't know can help us get better at pairing. So the first stage is unconscious incompetence, is the stage of blissful ignorance. You don't know anything about this topic, just that you want to learn, right? So this is the stage we will ask the most obvious question, Like, what is pair programming? Pair programming is a style of programming where two programmers work side by side, continuously collaborating on the same design, algorithm, code, or test. So why should you pair program? Like, why can't you do it alone? Why should you do it with somebody together? So pair programming produces 15% fewer bugs. People have ran like formal experiments, and there is enough proof that um, when you solo and when you pair program, there are differences, and when you pair program, the code has better quality, and it produces fewer defects, right? So pair programming also produces less distraction at work. When you are collaborating with your peer, you normally tend to not look at your phone or email or tweet or something like this, but rather focused on your work. And pair programming is helping you to expand your skill set and knowledge. So it's the easiest way to get onboarded or to learn something new, because if I don't know something and my pair is good at it, then I call my pair as my personal Google. So instead of going to a Chrome window and asking questions, I really have someone who could guide me through the process, right? So the other important thing which I love the most is good team morale. So the more you pair program, you start to say that it's not like my code, it's our code. Because when you pair program, you constantly rotate among the pairs and you get to work in many part of the code base. So it is really automatic for you to say that this code belongs to our team rather than it is my code. And pair programming definitely reduces the key person risk. This is also called as bus factor or lottery factor. So if somebody wins a lottery and decide they just don't want to come to work from tomorrow because they are now billionaires or millionaires, the team still continues to function. There is no knowledge silo or something like that. So I have been able to really switch to multiple teams in the past few years because of this reason, that like if I think yeah, it's time for me to accept a different challenge, be part of a different team, this is totally possible because you are not a single point of failure for the team, or you're not the key person. If you leave the team, then the team or your product is at risk. And the final point is it's healthy. So basically there is something called as a repetitive strain injury. So this is basically a musculoskeletal injury that could be caused by repetitive tasks, like trying like typing on the keyboard a lot, or like using mouse in a bad way or something like that. And when you pair program, you have like two folks sitting together and pairing, so which means your hands get enough rest. So moving on, so the next thing is like, what are the characteristics of pair programmers, right? So when you are working in solo, then there are like different set of characteristics, but when you work in pair, when you work together at a single code base, then what are the characteristics that one would possess, right? So pair programmers are those who focus, so they keep each other on task towards the same goal. They discuss, so brainstorm refinements to the system, so which is a great thing. Normally, like if you are sitting alone and questioning your decision, you now have somebody who can assert if this decision is fruitful or not. The same thing is like with understanding each other, so clarify ideas and try to be on the same page before starting to work, and care about each other, take initiative, help your pair to lower frustration. And then the most important thing is sharing. So your pair programmer is someone who shares the ownership of the code and the responsible and is responsible for the team practices. So you function as a team and not as an individual person. And pair programmers trust each other, so it's not a competition. You're not trying to outsmart each other, but rather trying to work towards a common goal, which is the betterment of your product. So pair programmers do not compete with each other, rather keep each other on task. They think out loud, care, and share responsibilities. Programming is a team sport, so pair programming ensures the team as a whole performs well, not only some individuals of the team. So in this part, we have answered the basic questions like why and how and what are the characteristics of pair programmers. So the next stage one would move on to is the conscious incompetence. So we now know what pair programming is and what are the characteristics and why you should do it. But this is the stage where you don't know how to do this yet. So this is more challenging stage where more learning occurs because you are really going to try your first pairing, or your you try to be hands on, and often our confidence is shaky in this stage, and this is the stage where we learn how to practice this skill. And so we really have to be you know caring about this stage where we try to get as much as knowledge as possible. So we talked about the whats and the whys, and now we talk about the how. So typically in pre-corona times, if you are sitting in together, so this is basically an optimal setup. So two engineers, you have like two monitors, two keyboard, two mice, one computer, and one task. So basically you have like both of you should have like control over the code base. So it's typically, if you Google pair programming, you normally see pictures where there is just one monitor and someone is sitting behind you. So this is also okay if you can't have this kind of setup, but an optimal setup in my opinion would be this, where both programmer have their personal space, and it's not like breathing over one shoulder, or like you really have your own space and this thing to control and work. So this also kind of like increases your the flow of thoughts. So now that everyone else has gone remote, there are also tools that help you achieve this kind of like the same setup, and I will talk about it a little like later. Okay, so like they say, it takes two to tango. So does for pair programming. Pair programming is pair programming. So the roles help us with the coordination, right? So when you have two people working together on the same code base, you can't step over each other. You can't like talk over each other. So you need to have like separate roles. So the most important part of pair programming is these two roles, the navigator and the driver. So the driver is the person who is on the keyboard and who is basically listening to the navigator, who has like the bird's eye view of the direction of work. So how are we going to implement the story, and the navigator is basically saying like, hey, this is how we are going to implement it, and guides the driver through the process, and the driver is on the keyboard and typing the actual code. So the navigator thinks ahead. The navigator ponders edge cases, spots bugs, then maybe suggest a refactoring, and asking like question and stay zoomed out. So the navigator is a little bit is a person who is trying to have like a broader view of the work, while the driver is trying to accomplish that piece of work. So one of the most important thing to note in this kind of like two roles is like how we try to accomplish the given task. So when navigating, ask questions rather than like making like demands. So instead of saying make the like do this refactor, oh, the variable name is not good, instead of saying that, like trying to be polite and say like, hey, shall we extract a method to make it readable. And the same time when driving, you have to think out loud and say what you're trying to do with your code. So the driver explains, okay, I'm extracting like two methods out of it, so it makes it even better, something like that. So if you keep this rhythm going on, then pairing is like really, really super fun. And sticking to the same roles is not so much fun, right? So like you have to then know when to switch the roles. So there are different techniques available. The most famous technique, if you have ever heard about pair programming, is the ping pong technique. So basically one person, so if you're really doing like test driven development, one person writes a failing test, and the other person, then you switch the hat and the other person becomes the driver and try to fix the test. So this is basically the most famous technique. The second one is task list. So when you start to work on something, you basically switch, like split the task in, like split the whole work into multiple small tasks, and then you prioritize them and then switch on the tasks. So when the task is complete, then you switch your roles. And one of my most favorite thing is because most of the times it's not super black and white, even when you are doing ping pong, like, you know, so you can't simply switch in failing test and so on. So the Pomodoro helps in getting a good balance. So you set a timer, so someone is a driver for 25 minutes or 45 minutes depending on the flavor, because I have seen that people find that they are productive on a longer cycle, like 45 minutes cycle with 15 minutes break, rather than like short cycle 25 minute cycle and a 5-minute break. So it's really up to the pair. So you can fix on some sort of like timing, and then once the time is over, then you take a break and then you switch your role. The final thing is like having a totem or a stuffed animal, and then you just pass it around. So whoever is having the stuffed animal is basically the driver, right? So all of these techniques exist because it's super easy to talk over each other or type over each other and not communicate properly. So these are like some of those techniques I have found really helpful when you go on this pair flow state. Moving on. So there are different type of pair programming. Solo is also kind of a pair programming, where it's just a regular programming, you work alone. You know, people are taking vacations, and you know, you are sometimes odd, and there could be some small tasks or chores or really easy things that you could do you know, by yourself. And then remote pair programming, so it can be that your pair is not co-located. You know, nowadays like everybody is remote, so there are apps like Use Together, Tuple, which basically facilitates really good screen sharing, where your pair and yourself can control the same screen and everything. So but what I have felt in this past 5 months of doing remote pair programming is like a good upload speed is really really important, because most of the times, like when my internet connection is really flaky with respect to upload speed, then my pair is not able to control my screen. There is some lags. In that case, normally what we tend to do is that we really have this driver navigator separation, and then you basically use some of the techniques to do some hard switch. So if you are the one who is driving, then you share the screen. Then when the other person become the driver, then they share the screen. So this is somehow I have found a good way to mitigate bad internet connection. And then there is also this thing called as a mob programming. So mob programming is when you have a large screen and more than like two people sitting together and working on the same code base. So when this becomes effective is like you are looking at so one of the examples where we constantly do these type of mob pair programming is mob programming is so let's say that you have package names or something, and you want to consolidate them, standardize them, and so on, and you want this knowledge to be spread among all the team members. So you all sit together and try to work on it. So if you want to achieve some sort of consistency, or like you are making a new architecture change and you want everybody to familiar with this, or if you're introducing a new programming language and you want everybody to be familiar with this, then this is like one of the best way that the whole team sits together and works on the same code base. So there is like this big screen, this code is on, and everybody gets like 5 to 10 minutes be the driver, and the rest of the team is guiding you like through writing the code and so on. Right? Cool. So in this stage, the main point is that now you know the role, the techniques. It's really to do the hands-on session, right? Your first pairing session. This is really, really important to get it right, because when you are in the initial stages of learning, starting with complex concept make you not want to learn more. I have seen a lot of people don't like this whole pairing after the first try, because they haven't thought through, or sorry, do you hear the drilling? Sorry. Okay. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so when you are in the initial stages of learning, starting with complex concept make you not want to learn more, so which can even make you to abandon the skill. And this I see happen a lot with pairing as well. So you really have to get your first pairing session right. How can you do that? Pair with someone nice and kind, someone you are very comfortable with. At the same time, pick the tools that you're comfortable with, so you and your pair. So don't try, like if you're comfortable with VS Code, don't start with JetBrains tool suite, or like, something like that. So always pick tools that are comfortable for both of you, and pick an easy and familiar task which you have done umpteen amount of time, because it is really important to get the rhythm of pairing right, like when to rotate, how do you be a driver, how do you be a navigator, and so on. And you don't have to do it like for 8 hours. Agree on a time and make yourself available without interruption. This is the most important thing. Like if you schedule like, okay, let's pair for 1.5 hours, and you have like so many meetings in between, then you really cannot see how you have paired, or how it has improved. You really need to have that time set, and you shouldn't have any interruptions in that time. And it is totally okay to be nervous. I can still imagine, like I still remember my really first pairing session, where only these thoughts flew in my mind, like, would I be so stupid? Would the other person think that I'm stupid? Because pairing is not a technical skill, or it's not a math equation. um, Everybody is human, nothing is black and white. So you will be nervous, but it's totally okay. And this is why you have to get a good person to pair with you, the person who you are comfortable with, to give it a try. And what I have learned in this few years is that asking questions is not a bad thing, and it is okay to be vulnerable. So every time you make a mistake, or you ask a question, you learn something new. So we are all human, and so don't worry if the other person is going to judge you or not. And also think this the other person is also having the same mindset, and this is normal when you're very new to pairing. So this is totally okay, and relax. It's okay to be nervous, and yeah, just do the thing, and have some faith, and it will work out for you eventually. So some of the things when we talk about pairing is also like the myths of pairing, right? So you cannot think alone. This is like one of the biggest thing that I have heard, because you are two people pairing together. How can you think alone? So I need some time to read a documentation. I can't read as fast as you. So am I forced to pair? No, pairing only means you cannot act outside of the team. So if you want to take your own time, if you want to have your own ideas implemented, you are always welcome to have a discussion with the team. Go separate, finish it. But the most important thing is that you communicate it back to the team. So and also the other myth is that pair programming fosters group think. This is also not true, because pair programming also fosters, like, brainstorming, having healthy discussions. So everybody is free to think on their own and put their view forward. And the other thing is, like, pair programming only works if you pair 100%. This is also not true. Not everyone can pair for 100%, like the whole working time, because you have meetings, you would have team events, you will have, like, most of us are part of like something outside of our product team as well. So you can stick to the core pairing hours. So you communicate with your pair, like when will you be available for pairing. And one of the other things is also like having solo tracks. So there are some tasks in our product that we would have done 100 times. So it's just like changing a configuration or like, you know, fixing some pipelines. This could be anything. So these are some of the tasks that's just ongoing and everybody in the team is familiar with. Then you can mark them as solo tracks. And if there are days that you don't feel like pairing, then you can also pick those solo tracks and just start working on the chores, etc. So now that we have analyzed or even done our first pairing session, this is the third stage, which is conscious competence. This is, I know that I know how to do this. So in the previous stage, we have learned how to do it, but to be better at a skill, we have to perform the skill consistently at will, and this requires attention and concentration, right? So moving on, so what makes a great pairing session? So the first thing is agree on a high level goal. So you have your Trello board or your pivotal tracker, whatever. So you have a story, you pick on it. So before starting to write something, agree always on a high level goal, like what you're going to achieve in that story. The second one is to break work into tasks. So sometimes, like, even though the story could be like simple, but it always helps when you prioritize the tasks and break it into small pieces so you don't feel overwhelming, and also like you have a sense of accomplishment when you finish one task together. And it also makes you like want to switch the roles. And you know, there are a lot of like taking breaks, for example. There are a lot of advantages to breaking the work to smaller tasks. Not just in pair programming, it also then makes you make small commits, basically. And the third thing is decide on the technique. So before starting to pair, discuss if you're going to do ping pong or pomodoro or whatever, based on like I said, some stories are good for doing ping pong, some may not be. So you can decide on the technique upfront based on what you're going to work on. And then the most important thing is configure Git to share credit, right? So you're working as pairs, so it's equally important to have like credits. And there are like super amazing tools for it, like Git pair, Git duet, and also the native Git has good support for you know, these kind of things that come as co-authored and so on. So it's really good thing to share credit. And then the most important thing is eliminate distraction, like I keep saying. So if you want to pair, then fix the time and don't have like meetings, interruptions, and so on. And then work and take enough breaks. I cannot stress this enough, because there are times when you feel like you are in the flow and you don't want to break, but you have to make sure that you take enough breaks, because pairing is really draining. So when you are writing code alone, you're not thinking out loud, you're not sharing your thoughts. But with pairing, you're working a little bit harder than you would solo. So yeah, make sure that you take enough breaks. And I have already said there are like different techniques, and when you have those techniques, always make sure that you know, you also specify that some time for break. And finally, every day once you finish with your pairing session, end with a small retro. I will talk about what you can talk about pairing session in retro later in the slides. So the other important thing to acquire good pairing skills is to rotate. So I said in the second stage, you have to find someone that you are comfortable with. But when it comes to pair programming, you really have to rotate between your teams, between pairs. And then you could come across different kinds of people, and there are dynamics that work with one and there are dynamics that work with the other. So it's really important to rotate the pairs, not only to find the dynamics, but also to spread the knowledge about the product between everybody. So an ideal time to rotate the pairs is like 1 day, But again, so if you feel like you want to rotate the pairs in 2 or 3 days, it's totally up to you. But I feel that rotating pairs every day is really good. So you get to also work on much broader part of your code base or your product. And this also, as I said, would improve your pairing skill. And there are a couple of problems that you will be facing when you are pairing. So one of the thing is like not minding the personal space. So what I have seen is that there will be two monitors, but the other person is leaning towards you or looking at the screen. Sometimes you trust the person, sometimes you don't feel comfortable when somebody is so close to you, and this could happen, and you can communicate this. But yeah, so be aware that if somebody is not minding the personal space. One of the things that when I was reading the extreme programming book, was even wearing a strong perfume could affect the other person, right? So you have to be mindful of your pair and what makes them comfortable. The next thing is get me a cup of tea syndrome. So this is basically something called as pair abandon. So you start to work together, but somehow, let's say that you are the experience level or expertise level is not so good. So instead of prioritizing learning or sharing, the other person just starts typing on the keyboard and doesn't heed to the pair or what they are trying to say, or if they're trying to say anything, it's kind of like watch me while I work attitude. This could happen as well. And the third thing that can happen is barely shipping and longer discussion. So you just go into this endless cycle of discussing, and it's either your way or highway, something like that. So this can happen as well. And the other thing is not taking enough breaks. If you or your pair or you both feel that you are in a flow, you don't realize enough time has passed by, and this really takes um, a toll. And also I find that taking enough breaks really rejuvenates you, and you basically play ping pong. Go. So I find this really interesting. And the next one is the superstar mindset. So often we are always rewarded for our individual contribution, but pair programming really makes you work as a team, and whatever you have achieved is the team's achievement. And people who have the superstar mindset may not want to share, they want to keep the work to themselves. This could also you can easily figure it out when you start to pair with this kind of like the people who have this kind of mindset. It is only natural because this is how we have been working for a long time. And then you can also face issues when you are in a different experience level. And pairing is also super emotionally hard. Like I said in the beginning, you have so many thoughts going in your mind, how the other person is going to judge you, or you're not comfortable asking the question, maybe you don't find a safe space. So one of the things is that it is totally okay to not want to pair, right? So if you don't feel like pairing, it is totally fine too. So you need to accept that, and that's no problem as well. And how do you basically address all these problems, right? So if this is where the mini retro after every pairing session helps. So if you basically are very new to pairing and you're very new to your pair as well, then I recommend having this retro after every pairing session. So the first thing you can talk about is the focus. So you can talk about did distractions sneak in, right? So the second thing is the pace of work. So were there long stretches of so basically did the session feel like a grind at any point? Was the pair not talking, or was the story too vague and you were not knowing what you are working on? Are you going down the rabbit hole? yeah, so things like this, you can really talk about those things. And then mainly communication. So this is basically, did you not talk at all? Was their pair abandoned? Or did you discuss a long time and didn't even like write a line of code for the past 1 hour? Things like that. Did you like, push your code? All of these things you can say like, okay, how did we do today in terms of communication? And then the sharing of work. So this is basically relating to the keyboard time. I have found out that many programmers love to type on the keyboard. So did you share enough of your work? Did you give the other pair? One of the things is like when you have a junior and when I say junior, like a beginner in certain topic and an expert thing, it can really happen that the expert wants to show everything and the expert is always typing on the keyboard. But when you give the chance for the beginner to type on the keyboard, they learn like faster. So you have to be really aware of it. And this topic, when you address this in the retro, this will be like something of an action item for the other person. So when I started to pair, I was so I was someone who was very familiar with Eclipse and was new to IntelliJ. And when we started to pair, my pair was like super expert in all the keyboard shortcuts with multi-cursor and everything. And one day I figured out that I'm really like, not typing at all, because I was thinking, okay, if I start to type, I will slow my pair down. Right. So my parents said like, hey, I see that you are really not grabbing the keyboard, or you're not eager to type, or you're not eager to be a driver. And then I said, hey, I'm not very comfortable with my keyboard skills, so I don't want to slow you down. But he then told me that this is not the point of pairing. So we had like this unplugged keyboard session. And then most of the times then I'm doing like the typing, and I learned the keyboard shortcuts. And even like 3 or 4 days back, someone said like my multi-cursor skills are amazing. So if I have not done that, then basically like there is no way for me to learn, because I will always hold myself back. So this is really important. And then the quality of work, right? So when you have longer discussion, when the work was vague or something, how satisfied were you with the work, right? So how you have done together as a pair? Did you introduce technical debts? So, and things like that. Was things not clear to you? Was it not like communicated to you whether these the reasons why the quality of work was bad or good? Or are you like everything you just so one of the best things about these topics is you can give constructive feedback instead of saying like, I didn't find our pairing session good, or then there is no place for improvement. And finally, action items. So these help you to make your pairing session at least 1% better the next time, and you keep repeating this until you reach the unconscious competence that that you can do it now effortlessly. The phrase, it's like riding a bike, you never forget how to do it. This is basically the stage which encompasses that it's so well you don't even realize that you're doing it. So how can you realize that you're doing it well, that you are an effective pair? So the first thing to a good pairing session is thinking out loud, and also keeping your pair in the loop and seeing what their reactions are and looping them in. This is the core of pairing. And the other thing is to be able to say, let us try your idea first, instead of going into an endless discussion. That okay, so you have this idea you want to try, let's try that first. And you don't show frustration, rather give constructive feedback. So like I said, the moment something happens, you don't like jump in, but wait for the retro, gather your thoughts, and see where this feedback fits in, on which part, focus, communication, quality of work, pace of work, and then give a really constructive feedback. And you really prioritize learning over productivity while pairing with a beginner. So if someone joins new to your team, they might not be familiar with all the tools, all the processes. So your goal should be to make them learn, and not like productivity, or I want to just finish this work and go on. And then you are happy to share the responsibilities, right? Delegate the work, share more keyboard time, something like this. And then when there is a point where you don't know something, then you are not like, you feel comfortable enough to admit that you don't know, let's figure this out. And also you admit when you are stuck or tired, like, so there are days when like I say you're you're physically present but mentally absent. Let your pair know that everybody goes through it. So yeah, if you are tired or stuck or anything that you're not feeling comfortable for on that day to pair, just let the team and the pair know. It's totally fine. And the most important thing that I always found out very nice is appreciating your pair. So when you find your pair doing a great refactor, or coming up with a really good name for a variable, those small appreciations make the session really, really amazing. And summing up all of these, it's like you are really humble and you're kind. So if you are able to assert that all of these things you are able to check, then yeah, you have learned pair programming. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about something that I really, yeah, that's close to my heart.
Cool, thank you. Do we have time for questions, Mariella?
I'd say we can spend the next 3 minutes for
Okay,
some questions.
cool. Yeah, so we have a couple questions in the Twitch chat from Selgabali. I think I'm pronouncing that right. If not, I'm sorry. They ask, do you have a code of conduct for pairing practices and or any kind of guidelines for interactions between pairing partners?
So there is not anything written, but in general, like we have the retros and we have some organizational guidelines towards code of conduct, and we use them for pair programming as well, because there is nothing separate, right? It's just a collaboration and two people working together. So a general organizational guideline is also working for us. But thank you for the great question. I've never thought about it, to be honest, like a special guideline for pair programming.
Cool, thank you. Yes, we have one other question from Sleepy Pioneer in the Twitch chat, who asks, do you have any tips for pairing in an interview when you don't have much time and perhaps don't actually know the person that you're pairing with?
So I have not done so many interviews in the Corona times, but the pre-Corona times, when the pair is coming to our workplace, I always don't jump into the code. I rather take the person for a small coffee break or a walk or something quick, 5 minutes, and just to talk about something other than work, what they're interested in. And generally, I find that interesting to get to know about the person on the other end. And I tried to do it when I was doing remote interviews as well. Always like have 5 minutes in the beginning to just talk about different topic. And I think that normally helps me to 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 gauge how we could do it, if the person is nervous or not, because most of the times I care a lot about to make the person comfortable, because they are in a very unknown space and they don't know you, you don't know them. So I spend some time to really make them comfortable and try to assess if they are nervous or not.
Cool, thank you.
Cool. So thank you so much, Shamala. And you jumped in last minute as well to give this talk. So thank you doubly for
Thank you so
being
much.
with us this evening. That was an amazing presentation. I think you've convinced a lot of pair programming skeptics in the room. And so thanks again. Welcome back, everyone. Up next, we have Mridu and a talk about chatbots and WhatsApp. Take it away, Mridu.
Yeah, Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Ridu Bhatnagar. I'm from India. And the topic for today's discussion is how to build conversational bots using WhatsApp. And at the moment in this session, we'll be building a vocabulary bot for WhatsApp. So can you change the slide, please? Yeah. So the problem statement regarding building this bot was, my mother teaches visually impaired students. So daily she had to send some of the messages which involved the word definitions, synonyms, antonyms on WhatsApp to her students. And then these messages from WhatsApp used to be read by her students. I mean, not read, there used to be text to speech conversion, and then they used to hear these messages and learn the words and their meaning. So she teaches English, that's why she had to send all of these regularly. So now the way she was sending it was, earlier she was searching these meanings and everything on Google, and then she used to type each and everything and then used to send the message. Now this whole process took a lot of time, and like this used to consume her a lot of time. So I thought of building something that could reduce her time. And now all she has to do is, with this solution in place, all she has to do is she queries the bot and just forwards the message to the students, and the students then are able to learn using their text to speech app as it translates everything to them. So this was the use case that I had built this bot for. And by the end of this session today, you will be, if you are following along, you will be building something of this sort, like this exact application. And if you are not able to follow along, there are separate links that I have shared that we'll be sharing on Twitch, that would have all the links that you would need, and that would help you in building up this bot all by yourself. So moving ahead, can you please change the slide? Yeah. So now we are just starting off with how we'll be building the application. It is assumed that you have little background with Python, and so that we can just build over it. You will, for this tutorial, this session, you will have to install Python 3.6 plus. So any version greater than Python 3.6 would work. Greater than 3.6 because in my source code I'm using F strings, and for F strings, we'll be needing a Python version greater than 3.6. Then you will have to install Flask. Then we have something as nggrok. This will help us in testing our application with the mobile if all our communication with the chatbot is working fine or not. And here I am using Twilio API for the communication. So you will need to create an absolutely new account on your Twilio, and here is the link for creating the account on Twilio. This link is being shared on Twitch as well. So you can just pick up the link from there, create an account, and then you can follow along this tutorial. Next slide, please. Once you have logged in, so the step one is you will have to log in onto your Twilio account, and then from there you will get your authentication tokens. The next step is, once you are logged in onto your Twilio account, there is another WhatsApp URL that you can see on the slides. It is there on the Twitch chat as well. You just need to click on this link. This would open up a Twilio console in your web browser. And then when you see your Twilio console, you will be able to see a WhatsApp number. There would be a phone number that you would see. And once you have the phone number, you will need to save that phone number on your mobile phone. Remember, the mobile device should be having WhatsApp installed on it. So you need to just pick up the number from the web browser that where you have opened Twilio, and then you have to save this mobile number in your device, and then you need to open your WhatsApp. The next step is, can you please change the slide? Yeah, the next step is you have to open the WhatsApp, and when you see the WhatsApp contact list, you will be seeing this newly saved number in your contacts. And if you are able to see the new contact in your list, that is what your vocab bot is. That is where the vocab bot is. So on my phone, I had saved the contact with the name vocab bot. You can name it anything you want. And this will be this is our vocabulary bot. And when you click this bot, you will have to send in a joining code. So that joining code is also available on the Twilio account. So you can just send join, and followed by that your code. You will be getting the code from the Twilio account that you open in the web browser. So I hope things are clear up till now. Are the instructions clear? Okay. So you can do these following things, and the joining code that you enter in your WhatsApp, that will establish the connection between your mobile phone and the Twilio account. And remember that no secret keys need to be shared with anyone. All those secret keys need to be kept with you. You need to save it, and by chance if you plan to push the code onto GitHub, make sure that you don't push any of the secret keys. The authentication tokens can be easily misused, so this needs to be taken care of. Moving on, yeah, can you please change the slide? Yeah. So as the first step, we'll be creating a virtual environment to just program our application. So the purpose of creating the virtual environment is just to keep the separate, just to keep dependencies in a separate environment, so that there are no conflicts because of environment. And also in Python, you must have observed that there are a lot of version conflicts that happen. So if we have a separate virtual environment, we won't be having all those, we won't be facing all those version conflicts that usually occur. Can you please change the slide? Yeah. So the next step is how to create the virtual environment. Virtual environment is an isolated environment, and these are the steps that you have to follow. So the steps that you see on the snippet here are basically the steps for Unix or Mac OS system users. And you don't have to use that dollar, write that $sign, start directly with mkdir. So mkdir would create a new directory, and here we are naming the directory of our project as WhatsApp vocab bot. And then we are we'll be moving into the newly created directory. For that, we'll be using command cd. So then you can write cd WhatsApp vocab bot. Once you are inside of your project directory, then you can create your virtual environment. So the command for creating the virtual environment is python 3 -m venv vocab bot. For this command to run, make sure that you have venv installed on your system. Otherwise, it would raise an error. So that is what you need to do. So venv is a Python utility, and vocab bot is the name of our virtual environment. And the next step is to activate your virtual environment. So the way to activate the virtual environment is source vocab bot bin activate. This will activate your virtual environment, and to check if the environment is activated or not, you will be able to see on the left hand side vocab-bot. The last command that you see, I am talking about the last command. So as the environment is activated on the left hand side, you must be seeing vocab-bot. And inside of this, we can install all our dependencies together. So I just write one single command, pip install flask twilio requests python.n. All these dependencies need to be installed, and we are basically using Flask for our application because we need to create a REST API endpoint that is our webhook. Then we are using Twilio client for communicating with the Twilio API. Then we are using requests module to communicate with our third party API that will be returning us synonyms, antonyms, word meanings. And the next package that we use is python.n. So python.n is basically helping us in like python.n is basically helping us in keeping our all the authentication keys as secret keys. It will help you load all your secret keys without explicitly mentioning them in your program. So you don't have to hard code all the keys in your main program. We'll be saving it in a different file. Okay, so I hope everyone has installed if you are following along with us in this tutorial. If not, there are links shared on Twitch that you can follow through and step by step do. Can we move on to next slide, please? Yeah. Now the similar steps are for the Windows user. There are some steps that are different in commands, different in case of Windows. So instead of mkdir, the command to create directory is md WhatsApp vocabbot. Then you will change the directory using cd command. So once you are inside of the working directory, then you can create the virtual environment, that is python -n when vocabbot. Moving ahead, when you have moving ahead, when when you have to activate the environment, you need to write vocabbot /script/activate. Once the environment is activated, like we had shared earlier, you need to install all the dependencies. And installation, that pip install command remains the same. Next slide, please. Now, if we have all the dependencies and installations in place, the next step to do is create a Flask chatbot service. So I'll just wait for a second till you install the dependencies. Once all the dependencies are installed, yeah, I'm sorry for the break. So once all the dependencies are installed, we can move ahead for the next thing. That is, we'll be creating a Flask service. Can you change the slide, please? Yeah. So this is how our webhook is going to look. You need to create a file named as app.py. And after you create a file, the first step is to import the Flask class. So we are doing from Flask import Flask, and then I'm writing app is equal to Flask parenthesis. We have double underscore name, and then I'm defining a function named as vocabulary. Whatever is the response that this function method is going to give, we'll be writing it in the next steps. At the moment, you just have to, you can write this exact snippet in the app.py in your app.py file, and this is where we'll be writing our complete logic for the vocab bot. Next slide. Yeah. Next, we'll be discussing messages and response. So in messages and response, what we have to do is, in the same function, we'll be elaborating basically the same functions. The function is, we had defined already vocabulary earlier. and then I'm doing request.values.get body, comma, then there are parentheses dot lower. So the first line that you see where I am initializing incoming message, here this step is written to extract the body that we are sending. So whatever message the user is sending is going to be extracted in this incoming message variable. Incoming message variable is initialized to whatever message the user is sending from WhatsApp. And the body of the message is in XML format. So request.values.get body body, this line that is written helps us in extracting that body. In the next step, response is equal to messaging response. So this messaging response is a class that we need to initialize. Messaging response class is also part of the Twilio library. Also in the imports, I'm sorry, I have missed adding the Twilio import. So you can follow through the code on GitHub as well. It has the correct imports. One import I have missed in this snippet. So this messaging response class is basically the Twilio is the part of Twilio client library. And then again, I am doing message is equal to response dot message, and then I am writing message. So all these things are part of the Twilio library that helps us in sending a formatted message to return a formatted message to the user. And then the last step is return str resp. So resp is my response. So whatever we will be doing in the vocabulary method is again going to return to the user. So the way this conversational bot works is, first time the user sends the message to WhatsApp, and then the WhatsApp returns back the response to the user again. So user is the one who initiates the conversation. WhatsApp doesn't initiate the conversation, user initiates the conversation. Yeah, next slide, please. Now we'll be discussing the vocab bot logic, that what is our request, what is our response. We'll be discovering all of those things. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the initial message that the vocab bot is going to return is the help message. Whenever a user says help, writes help in the message, the vocab bot will return a help message, and this is the function that helps in creating the help message. So I have defined a function create help message, and the help message says improve your vocabulary using vocab bot. You can ask the bot below listed things. So below listed things are basically the commands the user can enter in the WhatsApp bot. So the user can enter meaning hyphen type the word. So then you have examples hyphen type the word. Basically, the user has to replace this type the word with the exact word which you are querying. So example, when the user has to write meaning hyphen amazing, meaning hyphen experience. So instead of type the word, you have to replace this type the word when you query the bot with the actual word. And then next is synonyms, and then you have antonyms. So this method is the method that returns the help message for the vocab bot. Next slide, please. And here is the working example of how it is going to work. You won't be able to see live example at your end because first we will have to do the testing setup. But the purpose of writing the code that we had written, that we had discussed earlier is this. The user is entering help and the bot is returning the help message. Next slide, please. And now we have to see how our webhook is going to respond to the logic. we have to, we are from here, we are going on to next step. Our next step is basically to see what the bot is going to respond when the user enters any command. Next slide, please. So now we are kind of we are now in like writing code for our vocabulary method. So all the steps that we did earlier need to be same, and now you can add these two lines. Word synonym is equal to an empty string, then word antonym is equal to an empty string. So I am initializing these both variables as an empty string because we'll be needing these variables later in the later part of our code. That's why these variables are initialized with an empty string. Next slide, please. Yeah. So these snippets I am using only for explaining you the code. If you want to just directly see the proper formatting on of the code, please don't follow this. For proper formatting, you can cross-check the code with GitHub. So if you want to just plug and play the code and see how things are running, so you can just follow that GitHub code. I'm just explaining my source code. So then I am initializing a variable responded is equal to false. This I am doing because at the moment we haven't returned any kind of response to the vocab bot. That's why we have initialized it to false. In line number 2, as you can see, what I am doing is incoming message dot split based on hyphen. So our incoming message is like meaning hyphen and then the word. So suppose our initial message is meaning, incoming message is meaning hyphen amazing. So I'm trying to split it based on hyphen, and then the list words contains the list. So there would be two words now. At 0th position, I have meaning, and at 1 position, at index 1, I am having the word which is to be queried. Now what line 3 says is if length of words is equal to 1, this is double equal to. Don't confuse it with the initialization assignment operator. This is comparison operator. It has got changed because of the tool that I'm using for writing the snippet. So here we are comparing if the length of the words list is 1 and the incoming message is help. Suppose our incoming message is help and length is 1. So all I have to do is return the help message. We had already defined the help message earlier. Now I just call that help message and we would be returning that string as an output. And as we are returning something as an output, that's why I am doing responded is equal to true. So the first case is for taking care of the help message. It just checks for the length, sees if the incoming message is help, and then returns the help message. Next slide, please. And then from here, we are coding for returning the definition, examples, synonyms, antonyms. And I'm checking if the length of my list is 2. And then I'm kind of picking out that what is the thing that the user has queried. So search type would contain meaning, example, synonym, antonym. It will tell us what is it that the user is asking for, and then the variable input string has the actual word. And I'm using strip method so that I strip all the white spaces from the command. Otherwise it would be confusing. So strip is helping me to remove all kinds of white spaces from the command. And I'm explicitly checking for length 2 because I don't want the user to enter sentences. Suppose a user enters sentences in the chatbot, then it would be difficult to query the API, as the query won't be returning anything. If suppose a user enters how are you, then it is pretty useless to query the API. So that's why I have put strict checks on the length, making sure that only the queried word is of word length 1. Not the word length 1, but contains only one word. Length can be anything, but there is only one word. There cannot be two words. So now search type tells us what I am searching, and input string is our actual word. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now this snippet that you can see here is the actual code for returning the response. So when the length of the input string is 1, this is basically in the nested part. After we have done inputs, after we had done search type and query input string, I am again checking the length of the input string if it is 1 or not. If the length of the input string is 1, then I am just passing it as a parameter to my another function, that is get dictionary response. Get dictionary response is the function where we'll be querying the API, third-party API. But at the moment we can discuss the below code. All I am doing is, if search type is equal to meaning, you have to pick meaning from the response and return it to the user. If search type is synonyms, I pick synonyms from my response and then I return it back to the user. As synonyms can be a list of synonyms, that's why I'm iterating it. Response can have multiple synonyms, that's why I have put a for loop and I'm returning it to the user. Next I have is antonyms, and like antonyms also can be multiple antonyms for one word, that's why again I am looping and returning it. And then last is, if the search type is examples, I'm just picking the examples from the response and returning it. Next slide, please. Now, last step is taking care that if the user has queried something in the incorrect format, if the user is asking something that is not in the desired format, so we will return a generic message that says incorrect request format. So this is our last step. Here we are going to say that last step for the vocabulary method. Here we are going to say that the message you are like the request format is incorrect. Next slide, please. Whatever snippets that we have discussed, if you combine the snippets, here is a consolidated code that you can see. You can just directly use this code in your app.py file and save the code there. Earlier, I was just trying to explain each and every line of the code and the reason behind writing so. Next slide, please. Now, there needs to be some data source that tells us that what are the synonyms, what are the antonyms, what is the definition of the word being queried, and likewise the examples. So for that, I'm using an API that is Merriam-Webster's Thesaurus API. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we have shared the link on Twitch, and you can just use that link and create an account on Merriam-Webster's API. Once you create an account here, it will return you your authentication tokens and the keys. You have to use the thesaurus key. It will generate a thesaurus key. You will have to use this thesaurus key in your code. So for saving all your authentication token, your Twilio tokens, as well as your authentication keys for thesaurus, you will need to create a new file named as .env file. Here you will be saving all your secret keys. Secret keys are not to be shared. Next slide, please. So this is how we are creating the dictionary response. Initially, this word metadata dictionary doesn't contain anything. It is an empty dictionary. And I'm initializing the variable definition, example, synonym, antonyms, all of these with sorry, no definition available. So assumption is initially I have no definitions, no examples, no synonyms, no antonyms. And then To query the API, I will need the key. So now for fetching the key, I am importing the OS module, and then I am picking everything that we saved inside of our .env file. So that's why on the 12th line, we have the step os.getEnv key thesaurus. And we are initializing it API, like we are initializing the variable API key. Next slide, please. Now our API key variable contains the API key. And then we have this URL that you can see. URL is equal to, we have initialized the URL. So this URL I have found out from the REST API documentation of Webster's API. You can just follow along the documentation and you will find this exact same URL. All you have to do is the word needs to be put and then the API key needs to be put. Word is coming as one of the parameters in get dictionary response method. So you will have to query the word and then the API key. And then the next step is directly to use the request module. So request module help us in sending a get request call to the thesaurus API. So once you send a get request call, it would return you a JSON response. And then this JSON response is in string format. So this string format is not parsable. So for parsing it, again, I am doing JSON.loads. JSON.loads is converting it into a dictionary format. So the string to dictionary conversion happens, and then we have a dictionary in API response variable. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the code might not be like maybe very cluttered in this snippet, but the basic idea is now based on the response that is returned by the Webster's API, you have to parse that response and find meaningful things. So in this response, as you can see, SYNS, the word SYNS is basically our synonyms. It returns our synonyms. So I am checking that if there are synonyms present, I am just initializing the synonyms variable again. That means we have some synonyms. Then I'm checking for antonyms. If the length of antonyms is not equal to 0, so we will initialize the antonyms variable. And then I am looking out for the definition and examples. So for that I am iterating, and then I am again parsing up the JSON response. Then I check if there is any keyword as text. So text keyword means that we have a definition for the queried word. So then I am initializing definition variable again. And next I check for the keyword viz. If there is viz keyword present in the response from the thesaurus API, then we can initialize the example. And also there can be key error, as all I am doing is using the dictionary. And also there are different variations of responses possible from the Webster's API. So taking care of that, we need to do the error handling, and I'm doing like we have nested try except pair. First I'm accepting the key error, and then I have type error. So in case I don't find the ID, like in case there is any type error, so that can be caught up here. And type error, because there are cases when the Webster's API returns a list instead of a dictionary. So instead of dictionary, when it returns a list, that is when you have to handle the type error. Next slide, please. And now I am just in the word metadata empty dictionary that we had initialized earlier. I am just putting 4 important keys that we want. We want a meaning key that contains the definition. Then we want examples key that contains example. Then we want antonyms key that has antonyms. Then we want synonyms as well. So I am initializing that key and putting synonyms as well. So now word metadata, and then we return word metadata. Word metadata is basically our dictionary that we need to return as the response. This is our response dictionary that we were parsing in the vocabulary method. So this is how we are creating that dictionary. And I think things would sound a bit confusing as there is a lot of code. So best is to like side by side open the GitHub code as well if you are confused with the formatting. Next slide, please. So in this snippet, I have just compiled all the snippets together and written the code. If you are just following along and want the code, this is the snippet. There is one interesting question on Twitch, that is that how are the error logs? Is this shown in a control panel for Twilio, for example? So for my application, when we run this application, there is a Flask server that runs. And if anything comes in the except block, you will be able to see the print statement in that when your Flask server is running. But the thing is, when things are in production, the only way to see the logs is through Twilio. So on your Twilio console, you will be able to see something as logs, error logs. On the left-hand side of the panel, there is a field named as logs. And when you click on that field, so it even tells you that through which number you have received the message, what message have you received. If there is some error code from the Twilio API, so you will be able to see that error code as well. So all error codes are logged at Twilio's end. I hope I have answered the question. Next slide, please. Yeah. So now when we have everything inside of our app.py file, all we need to do is run our Python application. So now after writing a lot of code, all you need to do is write Python app.py, and we almost have our application ready. This is where we will be testing it, whether it is working fine or not. So when you are running this app.py, those print statements, if the debug mode is on, those print statements can be easily seen. Otherwise, Twilio has an excellent logging platform. Like on the console itself, you will be able to see all the error logs. And next slide, please. Yeah. Also, in the first step, we downloaded a package named as nggrok. This was downloaded so that we can test whether the communication with our mobile application is fine or not. So for this purpose, you just need to go inside of the nggrok folder and run the command that you can see on the screen. So I think it would be like it would get downloaded in the downloads folder. So you can just go inside your downloads folder and run the command that you see on the screen. So now what is happening is our Flask application is running on port 5000. nggrok is also running on port 5000. For this you will need to open two terminals. One will have your Flask application running. The another is going to run your nggrok. So both these things need to be parallelly running. That's why just open two terminals. Next slide, please. This is how your nggrok application is going to look like. Once you have everything running, This is the output that you will get. And the forwarding URL for you would be different than the forwarding URL for mine. So you need to take care of the forwarding URL. And you need to copy this forwarding URL, and then we will be pasting it in the Twilio console. So next slide, please. When you open the Twilio sandbox, all the when you open the Twilio sandbox, you will be seeing when a message comes in field. So in that box, you will have to paste the copied URL. And then once you have pasted the copied URL, then after that, you will have to write the REST API endpoint that we created. So we had defined a vocabulary function and then defined a REST API endpoint. So that is what you need to do when a message comes in field. You just have to put a slash and then followed by that write vocabulary. I hope this instruction is clear. So once you do all of this, you are all set to test the application. Next slide, please. Yeah. So finally, when everything in place, this is how your testing should work like. When you write the help message, it is returning you the help message. When you are trying to write meaning amazing, it returns you the meaning of amazing. Now I am testing for examples. So it is returning me the examples. Now I am checking synonyms. So it has returned me the synonyms. So all we are able to do all of this because of the Twilio API that we are using. So the Twilio has an API and there is a import that you will have to do in your source code. So it is because of Twilio and nggrok that you are able to see the expected behavior in the WhatsApp. Next slide, please. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, this was all I had for the presentation today. So if there are any questions or anything that is not understandable and I can help with that, you can ask me.
Do we have any questions, Mika? Thank you so much, Marido, for that talk.
Yeah, thank you, Marido. I'll just quickly check. No, I think Marido answered the question that was in the chat already, so I think we are good.
Great. So I will then close the evening with big thank you to our speakers for taking the time to share their knowledge with us this evening. And thank you to everyone who attended our event this evening. Remember, this is our last PyLadies Berlin event for the rest of the summer. And we'll be back sometime in September with new events for the community. So until then, have a great summer, everybody. And we'll see you in September. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.